Welcome everyone to TEDxCopenhagen Future of Work livestream. My name is Caroline Hart Sehested and I have the pleasure of being the host for these events. We have already conducted 5 really great sessions that you can already watch at our YouTube channel TEDxCopenhagen. Today we are back with our 6th session, profiling our future leader, the new skill set. And I think it's fair to say that we are facing some kind of double disruption as the fast pace of technology change in tandem with the pandemic is changing the way that we have been working and how we have been exposed to leadership for decades. It's time for change. Change in how we work and how we lead. The best-selling author Jacob Morgan notes in his book, The Future Leader, what he calls the Notable 9, which consists of 4 mindsets and 5 skills that the future leaders must master. The top 5 leadership skills, which are mainly soft and people skills, these include being a great coach, a futurist, a tech-savvy and digital fluent, a master in communication, and emotionally intelligent. The top 4 mindsets that futures are able to master is that they need to think globally and embrace diversity. They need to practice humility. They need to embrace technology without neglecting the needs of their employees. And they need to be open to embracing the unknown. Now, these are all predicted leadership skills and mindsets for the future leaders, which makes sense. But I think for a lot of us, it's much easier to talk about than to actually understand how these mindset and leadership skills actually really look like when we meet into the office on a random Monday morning. Now, Gandhi, he once says that the future depends on what we do in the present. And tonight, I'm really excited that we have no less than 2 inspiring business leaders whose present leadership styles will definitely be game changers for the way that we work with leadership in the future. Our first guest is Christian Stadil, a successful entrepreneur and CEO of THORNICO Group, which consists of more than 130 companies in more than 50 countries. And our second guest is another successful entrepreneur, Mik Strøyberg, who is the founder and CEO of Good Monday, a global office management platform. Both of them are leaders who tend to walk left when other leaders walk right, and who are on a disruptive journey, changing how we lead companies today and thereby into the future. And with that, I want to give a really warm welcome to our first guest, Christian Stadil. Let's see if he's here with us. Hi, Christian.
Hi, Caroline. Thanks for this very flattering intro, I must say.
You're very welcome, and thank you so much for spending the evening with us here in the TEDx studio at the Matricle 1. Christian, most leaders talk about being bold, being agile, being present. You talk about Buddha, blood, and bubbles, which will soon be part of your guiding stars for your next annual company event. You need to tell me and the rest of the people who are viewing with us, what does Buddha, blood, and bubbles means to you, and how do they reflect your leadership style?
Good question to kick off this evening with, Caroline. First of all, it's a working title that my good colleagues don't know about yet, or they might do now. But it's a little fun. It's our yearly colleague employee event. We have quite a lot of these, but we have one in particular where we gather most of our Danish colleagues and then a smaller variety of foreign colleagues also. And I just had a meeting with my holding colleagues a couple of days ago where we talked about if we allowed, again, Corona permitting, to have this year's award. We had to cancel it last year. Now in September, what should the theme be? What should we do? You say overarching, it's about having people meet each other across our 6 primary verticals in the group to knowledge share, to get to know each other. There's also an element of, primarily myself on stage, telling a little bit about how it's going numbers-wise, where we're going, projections for the group, also numbers-wise. We talk strategy and so on. But there's also this more, you can say, fun element. And that's where the Buddha, blood, and bubbles come in. We have been doing this for many years, and we always try to inspire in a variety of ways. And this year, I don't want to go into too much detail because, again, our colleagues, they don't know yet, but there's elements of blood, martial arts teaching. They have to, if they want to walk on glass, they can get a tattoo if they want to, even of the THORNICO logo. There's elements of Buddha. We have a very exciting Buddhist nun coming to help us learn how to meditate and to teach us a little bit about mindfulness. This is before the bubbles set in, I have to say. And then there's the bubbles, quite a passion of myself, being champagne and also working on making one myself. And that one is getting introduced to my colleagues at this event. So it's a mix of, again, more business communication in terms of where we're going as a company. We also have our yearly awards. We give out awards for the best idea given to a employee or a group of employees. We give out our yearly Karma Award, our version of the best employee award, and then we give out the Synergy Award to the group, to the team, or to the person that have motivated synergy across companies most. But I think this event is actually a good way to start, because I think it embodies very much, how we try to work a little bit differently. And it's not because we do this all the time. I have to say this, a lot of the time, of course, it's also hard work. We have production around the world where there are some really hardworking colleagues there, really working there behind off, to reach their production goals and so on. So it's not only about, some of us here in Denmark having a fun evening. Is very important to say. Yeah. But it's still yes, sorry.
I think, Christian, when we talked the other day, one element that was really important for you to stress is that even though you can say some kind of fragment organization structure with a lot of different companies, you are still able to you said it, work as a family while you have fun. And I think that, Buddha, blood, and bubbles is just a snapshot of integrating the fun part. But Christian, you have definitely been exposing yourself as a person who lead with the heart, and has also written different books around company karma and how we need to put we before me. And I think that a lot of us are curious to understand why leadership is so important to you, why you have this passion for leadership. So maybe you want to put some words on that.
Yes, very interesting. First of all, how we lead in THORNICO Holding, and that is the entity from which we lead. It's important to strengthen the notion and just to state the fact that we lead very much also through our vertical CEOs. And that is very important, because those are the ones that should have all the honor. Those are the men and women that creates the results, and those are the ones really doing the leading on a day-to-day basis. So you say our biggest task in THORNICO is, first of all, to hire the right CEOs, and then to a large degree also communicate through them. I really believe that a fish rots from the head down, and the opposite is also the case. So there we have a big task. And again, a lot of also my own leading is done through them. I like actuality hooks. So an example is here in a couple of weeks, the 28th of May, where we have our yearly General Assembly. There we always start with a CEO meeting, and we have a variety of topics. We're actually just working on them right now. After that, we have myself kind of just explaining where we are numbers-wise, strategy-wise, and then each CEO, starting with the ones that have performed best in terms of realized numbers from, in this case, 2020, and down to the ones that have performed the worst, so to speak. They present realized numbers from 20 and projections for this year, 21, and a little bit about the drivers and the markets and the business models and so on. And that is kind of an example of a platform, where we, try to, of course, get closer to each other, but also to, again, this kind of, the communication towards the CEOs, and then later in the day, also towards from middle management and up. And then we all in the night go to a place called Karlslund and get egg tart and and beers. Yeah. So I think these kinds.
So that's where the family connection is being nurtured.
I think so. I really think so. And I, before just had some of my kids there in bed now, and in that process, I just did a little bit of thinking about what we were going to talk about. And I think when I was younger, I was probably what we call studentikoos in Danish, about a lot of probably fancy words sometimes and so on. But really to feel what I mean when you ask about leadership and so on, and what is that really, besides the maybe fancy words from time to time. For me, it's very much about, and that's also why on your question, I think it's very interesting to lead people. And I have thought that since I was in the military, as being only 19 years old and also leading people there. It is about, first of all, communication. I think most leadership is about communication. Being at me in the General Assembly, at the THORNICO event, runningly, when we are very active, because we are 5,000 colleagues spread across these 50 markets. So we really try also to communicate, also from a holding point of view, we have what we call karma screens in all canteens, where we communicate through a newsletter, through our version of an intranet, which we call Indrasnet, which is based on a Buddhist notion, by the way. But communication is the most important thing. But under that comes 3 or 4 points that maybe I can address. Yeah. And one of them is to make our colleagues, our employees, feel safe. And this from the CEO level all the way down. We as humans, and I know this very much for myself, we really perform very badly when we feel fear. And that's why, if the persons watching today, haven't done already, if they are leaders or coming leaders, haven't negated the notion of management by fear, they should do it now. Not just from a kind of a humanitarian point of view, but simply because it's bad for business. Employees that feel fear, they don't perform. When we feel fear, we go in a fight or flight mode, or arteries, they thicken and they harden, and we lose contact with parts of the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex, and we become often very conscious in a very bad way, in a rigid way, meaning that all our optimal competences, our ideas, our feeling in terms of what is good to do now, what is bad to do now, emotional intelligence and the likes, that goes out the window. So if you want creative, innovative leaders and colleagues in a company, you should not practice management by fear. You should create a safe environment. And I really think it's more than the most important thing. And again, as mentioned, we have these top good CEOs that just really high perform most of the time. So I think from me sitting in a luxury position in holding, I think it's actually the most important thing to hire CEOs that are not, pardon my French, a-holes, that are nice people. And of course, you have to be hard sometimes, you have to push sometimes. I have to do that, they have to do that. But that are mostly nice people, someone you want to have a beer with. And I promise you, all our CEOs today, Michael in STG, Alan in Hummel, Thomas in shipping, Jørn in lactosane, Ronald in real estate, Torben in Hartmann, and so on in packaging. Did I miss someone? Hopefully not. Henrik and Ove Dane, they're all really nice people, and hopefully some of you watching today knows these guys, and including our CFO, a woman, Marianne, I have to add. Very nice people that you want to have a beer with. They're professional, they're very good, they're hardworking, but they're also generally very nice people. And I think we would rather go 10-15% down in competences for us to have somebody that we want to share a beer with, somebody we actually like, because then we know they will behave in a certain way towards their teams and their direct employees. So I think that is one of the most important things.
So people that you could actually sit on a plane to talk you if we were not in the situation that we are right now. But what I really like about our chat the other day, Christian, was that you said that it's not about all the fancy leadership philosophy words, but it's more about something as simple as creating meaning. That is why people stay in the company and continues to drive value. So I'm curious to ask you, how do you kind of lead and create meaning for your CEOs in the workplace, and how do you kind of integrate that meaningfulness in your everyday company culture? Because that's a different size to maneuver, but it's definitely, I agree with you that it's probably the most important reason for why people get up in the morning and go to work. So how do you embed that in your company culture about creating and having a meaningful job?
First of all, we can do much more than we already do. I think we have just started now, to use a cliche, on this journey. I always try to get around that word, but let me use it anyway. But creating meaning, working with purpose, that is important. That is important to us, and I think it has to be important for leaders out there, and especially when it comes for the leaders and to the leaders of the future. Many studies show, just to mention that very briefly, that salary, depending on which study you study or you read, salary is down on a 4th or 5th place, and before that is self-realization. Can I evolve in this company? Is it a nice place socially? Can I further myself in terms of education and challenges and so on? So I think to retain employees, to attract in terms of employer branding, we have to have and to work with meaning. I remember 2 years ago, Harvard Business Review published a very interesting inquiry based on a study on Fortune 500 companies, very clearly showing that also meaningful companies, they actually also earn more money. So that's kind of a very positive byproduct. And of course, very interlinked and intertwined. But I think it's very important. And how do we do it? Again, some of the before mentioned initiative, that's a part of it. But also, again, as I said, communication, the platforms through which we, gather our colleagues, employees, make sure that it's fun. Communicate what we want with the company, where we're going with the company, what we believe in. We have our company karma philosophy, again, where we try to be involved with projects that also makes a difference. And again, as mentioned, we can do much more, but I think we do quite some okay things out there, and that is very important. And it's also to involve, because I always get back to this word involvement. You probably also know the old, maybe it's a little bit bullshit bigger here, but the old phrases, tell me and I'll forget, show me and I might remember, involve me and I'll understand. Involvement is very important, and to create meaning, I think you also have to involve. It's not just enough to stand on the stage, which I think I've also been doing too much through many years, and I also found out that it's very important to involve. So today, when we work with karma projects, when we work with the strategy, again here at the CEO meeting, at the management meetings in General Assembly, we try to involve as much as we can, also in the general direction of the company.
And Christian, when you talk about this involvement, I think this is something that many leaders today see as some kind of challenge, because they are leading what we know as multi-generational workforces, where some generations need more involvement and needs to be more empowered. Other generations need, you can say, maybe a little bit more directions. So how do you navigate? I mean, you're also very interested in the different generations and how to approach and how to engage and how to get them to perform the best. But how can you kind of advise leaders with the knowledge that you have in engaging the different generations that you cope in THORNICO? Because I know I was a little surprised that you actually have a pretty high anxiety, or that people have been with you for many years. So how do you make sure that you engage and that you cope all the different needs when you have younger generations and generations that have been in the work for many years?
Yes, it's true. I'm quite proud of our, the number of years that we have, retained most colleagues. I think it's around 15 years for CEOs. So that's quite high. But in terms of the generations, I think these things we're talking about today, that I'm also sure that Mik is going to address, is that there's spillover effect to my generation, Gen X, born between 65 and 79, and to the coming generations, but very prevalent for Gen Y, again, born between 79 and 97, is that, first of all, again, they want to be involved, as mentioned, and that is very typical. Again, they spill over to the other generations, but it's very clear that they want to be involved, because they're used to this from when they grew up, with helicopter parents flying over them and driving them to karate and tennis classes and all that. We call it curling parents in a kind of loving way in Denmark. But they, to a certain degree, expect the same when they come out. They have a turned around Maslow pyramid of needs, where self-realization, and I see this every day, is very, very important.
Yeah.
So they want to know, how can I realize myself through working here? They want to be proud of the company where they work. They want to be so proud that they want to talk about it Friday evening together with their friends. And that's also why we work differently. That's where the Buddha blood and bubbles come in, to create a company and to work a little bit differently. So people actually are kind of proud, not all the time, but sometimes, to work as a part of the THORNICO group and the THORNICO family. And it's a little bit different, and it's fun. So I think it's very prevalent, especially for Gen Y, and to work for these kinds of things, because it's a great generation. And also the Gen Zs that we are also getting out into workplace now. Many of the things that we see with Gen Y is even more extreme with Gen Z, in terms of, they want to work for a do-good company, the Greta Thunberg generation, and that's not just something they say, they really mean it. We see Red Cross, they get many more volunteers that they got from my generation. We probably were too busy standing in Victor with our phone turned off and saying, still, and I want a bottle of Dom Pignon if one could afford that at that time. But so I think that it's really interesting generations that are coming out now, that are looking for different kinds of companies, and this has just been strengthened after COVID-19, because I think we're going to see a certain amount of the stickiness in terms of remote working. It's not the holy grail, but I think there's interesting prospects in this. As I told you in the pre-interview, in Sonovo Technology Group, we calculated with adding around 400 million on our top line this year. But in the same year, we count on only using half of the cost that we have used before on travel. Giving our service engineers HoloLens glasses so they can troubleshoot from a distance to customers in the US, for instance, from Odense. All these things that we have learned through Corona. So I think communication becomes even more important, because we're not going to be so much together with our employees and colleagues in the future as we were before. So communication, and also delegation, what we call self-leadership, selvledelse in Danish, will also become more and more important in the future post COVID-19.
Yeah. And I think that, Christian, was actually the answer to my final question to you, which was about what's the most critical driver to lead into the future with so much uncertainty. And I think you're really hitting it as you're talking about the communication and involvement. So with that, I want to say a big thank you for taking the time to share your insights and words of wisdom. And I wish you all the best of luck on your upcoming company event. I think that a lot of people here in the studio would love to join just to feel the engagement of that event. So thank you for the time, Christian, and all best.
That's very kind of you. Say hi to Mik from me. I think you're in for a treat.
I will. We have. I think we have Mik on the line coming with us in a minute. So, but until we have him ready with us, I think maybe we can take one more question.
For sure, Christian. And you're also welcome, Caroline, because one thing is talk, another thing is walk. So if you're amongst those listening tonight, and thanks all for listening, if you want to, pull two names out of the hat, you're welcome to join the THORNICO event.
I think that would be. I think that would be a great perk for the people in here.
So, so on me, and there's good food and all these kinds of experiences, and you can see what it's all about. And I really mean this. If it can create some value,
I think that's what we need once in a while, to have really see people who walk the talk and see how it actually looks in real life, and not just in the Harvard Business Review. So thank you for that invitation, Crystal, and I think that we are ready with Mik now. So our second guest today is Mik Strøyberg, who is the CEO and founder of Good Monday, a global office management platform offering managers and administrators a way to take control of their offices. So Mik, I'm going back a year because I need to share with the viewers what happened a year ago when COVID-19 kind of shut down Denmark, and you and your team stayed up until 4 a.m. to kind of pause, you can say, the service to your customers, so that they didn't have to do it themselves, providing high service to your customers. And what happened next morning was that you actually went into the office of Good Monday. You took a tour in the office. You packed all the computers, all the screens, the chairs, the tables, their mouses, everything, and you put it in your car, and you drove around Copenhagen and the area around Copenhagen to ring the doorbell and personally deliver the home office box to each of your employees. And I think that, at least when I think about it, I haven't heard anything like that. So I think that you are by many seen as a role model in leadership. And with that example, I'm curious to hear your insights on what leadership means to you, and why is it even more important to talk about leadership, looking at the changes in our work life that we have been put ourselves in through the COVID-19.
Thank you for that opening, Caroline. It's almost Hearst, but it's actually a great story because the first time somebody reached out to me because they saw that we posted stuff around it on LinkedIn to show our employees that we were actually there for them. It was all about equipment and moving forward and making sure they had the right setup to be as efficient and productive as possible. But for us, the most important thing was to acknowledge that the world was upside down. And this was a perfect opportunity to be present and to actually show people that we cared. So one thing was handing out computers and screens and doing all that stuff. And it wasn't one time because I have an old Volvo, so I had to go 7 or 8 times. But it's more to stop up with them and be present and talk to them. What does this mean? Where are we at? What is this world like? How can I help you? So again, being the servant leader that I have to be when there is a position where I have to lead them by a distance. So grabbing an opportunity where you can actually show people that you care and you can be present, I think that's important.
And I think when you talk about, go ahead, Mik, sorry.
No, just to to answer your question, all of this boils down to how the future leader is probably going to lead this. It's all about being emphatic. It's all about understanding. It's about being present, but it's also about listening and communicating. Leadership, which is kind of like a support function, even though it has some kind of direction. It's about figuring out how you can make your employees better, but also treat them as something else than employees because you hired them, and you hired them often because they're better than you, but also because you want to make sure they're the best version of themselves. And I think from going back, what we've seen in the old days was leaders, often just a tad young and out of some kind of school, and they get a big responsibility. And what you think when you're young and you're in a leader job, it's that you have to be a manager. And when you're the leader, you have to know best, which means you're the smartest guy in the room. And often they start their conversations with listen up team. That's often the Kickstarter for all young leaders. It's a listen up team, because here comes truth. And when that happens, then everybody's just going to do what this mediocre manager, micro leader is saying, instead of going in there and figuring out, how can I make this entire team, where often all of them are better than me, even better? How can I make sure that they take in the responsibilities of being what they need? And I could keep on saying everything that Christian has said, because there's so many great points in this, because the whole movement has been going on for 20 years. We're just grabbing an opportunity which came out of COVID, where the managers who are looking over people's shoulders, they're having a difficult time because people are sitting in their couches. So if they have to look over their shoulders, they have to travel around to actually do that. So new leadership, as Christian touched on, is based on trust. But trust is twofolded. So trust is not just about the manager or the leader or the company trust the employees of actually doing their job while they're at home. It's all about making sure that the employees actually trust the company and the managers. Because it's not like if I tell someone on my team, trust me from the get-go, there is no trust, because trust is something you build. And it goes through this entire thing where you communicate, you're in dialogue, and you figure out how to actually bake a cake together. And I think that's important.
And I think what you also mentioned when we talked the other day, Mik, was the example of a submarine captain, how he would, engage people to kind of take the lead. You said that you a good leader, and what you do is that you hire people who are smarter than yourself. But maybe you want to share a little bit about your leadership philosophy in regards of how much you empower your people at Good Monday with the analog to the submarine story, if you want to enlighten on that part.
Yeah, I think to boil it down, and I actually think it's a great story because it was the worst performing submarine in the entire US Navy that suddenly was the best. And one of the big things was it's pretty difficult to handle a submarine. So if we make mistakes at Good Monday, it's okay. Like, we can handle it. If you make a mistake on a nuclear submarine, it's kind of bad. Like, you don't want that to happen. So, but what often happens in companies is if you ask employees to come and ask you for the answer, then you become the answer, which means you always need to be smarter than everyone else. And often when they ask you something, you have to say like, because of this and this and this is never going to happen. So this is what's going to happen. If you instead tell them, next time, come and tell me what you're going to do, and then we can discuss it and I can approve it, then suddenly you have to think about all the pitfalls. Suddenly you have to be in my position to think about all the surroundings in a 360, holistic way of thinking business. And I think providing everyone on the team with those tools to understand what will happen if I actually make this decision. If I'm on this Good Monday submarine or whatever submarine it is, instead of just coming and asking permission from mom and dad, and I come and say like, okay, listen up, this is what I think is going to happen. And then we can go into dialogue and then suddenly we'll make it happen. Then you start creating leadership within the team. And that will often just drizzle down as a beautiful waterfall, where the next ones, they're going to tell their employees or whoever is referring to them the same. And suddenly you have this big traction of a team where everybody is taking a leader position without referencing to anyone. And it's not because it should be a 100% flat hierarchy. It's more about understanding the business. And to give you like a core example of what we do in our business, a regular P&L, where you have everything from what you make in GMV down to net, and you have cost to serve, and then there's other costs and stuff like that. Instead of just sharing that on a management meeting where I'm in front of everyone, we put names and titles on all different lines, because everybody gets up in the morning to do something. There's always a reason why you're on the team, why you're hired. And often it's difficult because you have these micro tasks and you're just doing stuff, and someone is in customer care, someone is in sales, someone is in product development, someone is in tech. But where do I fit in? And when you look back on a Friday or at the end of the month, you need to figure out, does it actually matter what I did? And to make sure that you know exactly why it really matters and why the P&L is actually changing in a positive direction, you need to know which numbers you can trigger. And I think coming into this whole, what we saw through COVID was also tools like OKRs suddenly exploding, because people first need to know the overall objective of the company. And then they need to figure out, how do I affect key results when people can't see me? And I think it all goes back to, in the good old days, 2018 or 19 or something like that. Like if you wanted to just be at a job, just be at a company, all you had to do was show up. That was like 50%. I'm at the office, I got up, I got dressed, now I'm here. So it's like, I'm not going to get fired based on that. And then you had to perform, and then there was something on top. With COVID and changing everything around, suddenly you were not buying hours anymore. You needed to show progress even though you were not there. You're not the fun guy at the office. You're not the one who suddenly just was there before everyone else and left later. Suddenly you're based on something that creates true results. And I actually think that's extremely positive for those who can handle it.
So it's almost a little bit like a gift that we have been going through the COVID-19 crisis, that we have been forced to work in another way. And we do see a lot of companies who are really rethinking radically their work models. Some people are going to have, these hybrid work models where it's up to the employees if they want to work from home. Some people are more, you can say, directive in saying that now you can have 2 work days at home. You're talking about the importance of having internal trust, and now it's becoming even more important because you need to lead also remotely. But I'm curious to get your perspectives on what you have done in Good Monday in regards of you can say, creating a new future for your workforce. How has the pandemic kind of changed the way, if it has changed the way you work at Good Monday in regards of having a more trust or a free workforce? How do you can say create a new work patterns in the office with your leadership style? What have you done differently than 1 year ago?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we was digging into, we have OKRs in our business as well, and we are also changing it quarter by quarter. But I think the whole psychological trust, the way that you can actually behave within smaller groups, is super important. We actually took that learning from Google back in the days, where they saw that the most skilled teams didn't outperform the teams with the internal trust. And it's not just trust in, hey, do what you want to do, and we all trust each other in big circle. It's also about movement. So it's about, how do we solve this? And instead of trying to be the smartest guy in the room, instead of trying to get something through, you also accept all the time that, okay, your thought was better than mine, and what you did there actually accelerates this over here. So it more becomes like a dynamic group. I think that's one of the big things that we learned. We also learned that the work hours is different from team to team. And instead of saying like everybody at the workplace should work 2 hours a week or 4 hours a week at the office and then the rest home, I think it's much more fluent. I actually think it's super unambitious when people go out there and say like, let's work 4 days a week instead of 5, or let's work 2 days a week at home. It's all about the group dynamic. So if I'm in a group with 4 others and we outperform everyone else by working Friday morning to Monday evening, then we should work Friday morning to Monday evening. And I think the biggest thing in all of this, and we discussed that in our brief chat as well, Caroline, it's 95 years ago we invented the 40-hour work week. Like Henry Ford did it 95 years ago. And it's not like he took it up to 40 hours, he took it down from 48, and he took it down from 6 days to 5. So now we live in this momentum, and we've been doing it for 95 years. We landed on the moon, we created internet, we did all kinds of crazy stuff, and we didn't change like the normal pattern of how we live as people. We just went in there and we created the setup. So kindergartens, preschools, schools, gymnasiums, everything is surrounded by, we have a new structure. That's why, like, my company is named Good Monday, but people fucking hate Mondays, and they love Fridays because suddenly it ends. Instead of trying to figure out a system or a way where you can say, like, my life is beautiful all the way through. There is no Friday candy and there is no Monday depression, but there is something that's fluent where I make my life actually happen. And I think that's one of the things that we've implemented at our workplace. And I think the fun thing that came out of it was people are actually really hungry for coming into the workplace. And a lot of them are there all the time, but they're also there on Saturdays and Sundays, and sometimes they're not there Monday and Tuesday. So just figuring out the patterns on how do you work best, but also putting people together who can actually work in this dynamic.
And it sounds like you are, as a leader, you really need to let go of the control that we have been, used to, as we've been working with the old Ford working patterns, still working 40 or 37 hours a week. So I think that a lot of leaders, when they hear your way of leading, it scares them a lot. So I'm curious to hear your perspective on if you want to start that journey of giving more autonomy and letting people work when they're working best, whether it's in the evening, the morning, in the weekends. How do you kind of implement that culture in your organization and kind of leave the old habits behind? Here comes the $100 million answer from you, Mik.
It's difficult when you have 5,000 employees and you need to start all over. Also, just because there is some convenience in everything you do. But we just saw 12 months where people actually worked in a different way. So patterns, they have changed. So this has been the world's biggest experiment ever, where we had to do everything. And I think there's one thing that's certain for the last 12 months. Some actually used it and some didn't. Some have been waiting to fall back into old patterns and are just waiting for the pandemic to end so they can do what they've always done. Instead of seeing this as something new where you can actually be more efficient and productive, but also retain your employees even more. So for new companies, it's all about when you recruit, instead of talking about hours, you talk about deliverables and what you want to obtain. What is the goal for this company? What's the brand and DNA? And this is why I'm hiring you. So in my first job as a manager, I was a supervisor at a media company. And my biggest role was to make sure that people got there on time and didn't leave before the day end, which was like, I was a prison guard, basically, and sometimes tried to motivate through phony gifts, right? Growing up, I can see how my patterns work. I can see how I'm the best version of myself. And it was only a few years back where I suddenly understood that I'm giving myself a freedom that makes me work even harder and better and create better results, but I'm not doing it with my employees. I'm just keeping them in line saying, like, you have to do this, but I can actually step out, even though they were more competent within their roles than me, even though they worked with something that I didn't even understand. So there was just like all these things coming through. And now I think the dynamic that we have, nobody's going to be hired, especially post-COVID, where they wouldn't almost demand it when they come into an organization like ours. And for future leaders and for everything else, it's not about creating. If you have to create patterns that are so strong, then it's because you don't have the sight to see how much you can actually obtain and gain. So, and then you need to hire someone else to do your job, and you can do something else to create structure. So it's all about who you are as a leader as well.
Yeah, and I think you as a leader, the example that I gave in the beginning, where you personally drive home to all your employees, is something that I hope a lot of leaders will be inspired of. But I also want to get some more examples from you, Mik, in regards of what you do on an everyday basis, because I think that we can all talk about how we should do, but the hard thing is kind of to implement it every day. And I like your stories about having the small post-it notes. So maybe you want to share a little bit about how you use post-it notes, because it's not On the whiteboard you use them, but it's with other purpose and power. So maybe you want to give or share your personal use of post-it notes.
Yeah, but I can also share where it comes from, because what I've learned through the last 20 years is that when you're sitting in management, you have a ton of great intentions. All your intentions towards everyone on the team is crystal clear, and they're often 99% of the time extremely positive. So you're sitting there in your management and you're talking about how can we make the world better for all employees. But to do something that's special for all your employees takes time. It also takes money, but it takes more time and effort to do something that's special. Like everybody can go out and do a kick-ass Christmas party where they just paid for something and for people to be there. But to find the micro moments and actually be there for employees is so time consuming. And I think the first example I gave you is the best gift you can give in a relationship. I actually got it this morning from my wife. And I actually also got it from my employees because I had surgery yesterday. And there was actually a yellow post-it, like get better soon. And I think it's so important that you do something like that. So our example was, if I take the time when I'm leaving before my family wakes up to get a pen, get a yellow post-it, write I love you, and put it on the refrigerator, that's more than anything else. And the reason why it's important, or why it's actually extremely worthwhile, is because it doesn't cost me anything other than me being present, which means a lot to people if you're there. Because it doesn't cost a lot, because it's not a $2,000 kind of bag I'm giving anyone, you don't have to give anything back to me. You just have to say thank you, or you just have to send a smiley. Like, it's so cheap, but it's a present been giving back and forth. And I think when you do that in your day-to-day life, it becomes a rhythm. It becomes like it's just something that is built into you. So we do all these small things at the office, like put a yellow post-it on someone's computer when they have a birthday, or sending them dinner when there's something that's happening, or if somebody at the team in one group overhears that somebody likes chili, then you buy chili plants. And there's like all these small things. Yeah. The price point is extremely low, but that you heard it and you remembered it, but most importantly, that you acted on it is so important, because the next generation, they're going to need much more. It's not enough at a Christmas party. It's not enough that you remember their name. And again, in the old days, 10 years ago, just remembering the name and having a Christmas party was more than enough. If you had barista coffee, you were kind of like mind-blowing. Today, the hygiene is just so high when it comes to everything you want at the office, but also how you want people to like recognize what's my daughter's name. You have to remember my birthday. You have to remember last time I went on vacation, what I actually did. And if you don't, it's because you don't care. And then I'll move on, because then I want to be in a company where people actually care about me. Yeah. So I think that's a big thing, that it takes time and dedication, which means that if you're in groups, you can make that time and dedication and being present, you can make that an integrated part of how you run your business.
And I think that's a really good example that is very easy to implement and also doable to scale, even though you're a bigger company, if you think it in a smart way in your everyday business. But Mik, we've been around, you talked about trust, you talked about being a good listener, you talked about micromanagement, the importance of being present, servant leadership. You've really covered a lot of interesting aspects of leadership today and going into the future. So I want to just ask you a final question. If you can kind of boil all of this down and give one really good advice as a leader to be successful in your performance in the future, what is it that you need to do more of?
And that's a great question. I think the most important thing moving into the next steps of being a leader is, first of all, every time you have an opportunity to be present, and it's obvious, but it's also time consuming, but you know how much it will take immediately. Make sure that your entire organization is based on the same values. So for us, even if you're 19 or if you're 60, you still know that like a yellow post-it is not going to be something that is groundbreaking for any of them, because it's built in. And when they start to do it, then suddenly you've created something where it's not all on you. So in the same way of being a servant leader, where you actually want people to take responsibility and know how the culture runs and how the company runs, you also want to make sure that all team members start acting in the same way towards each other. So suddenly it's about, I hate the word family when it comes to companies, because at some point somebody gets fired, and you would never fire any of your anyone in your family, but you become an extremely strong team where you connect in a higher degree, and you don't want to let go of it. And you can't do it yourself. So again, you don't want to become the answer, but you don't want to become the only one carrying the culture. Culture is something that spreads. So to build that in and actually work hard on it is super important. And then lastly, when you hire people, make sure they understand why they're getting hired and what their purpose is, instead of hiring them for hours and then at some point just letting go of them, but actually taking them in and truly believing in them. And again, the servant leadership is mainly about supporting. What can I do for you? If you say that every day to at least 5 to 10 team members, then suddenly they'll understand they actually mean it. And then you can start paving the way to make them even better.
And with those words of wisdom, Mik, I want to say thank you so much for joining us at TEDxCopenhagen here at the Matricle 1 in our live studio. And I also want to say thank you to Christian Stadil from THORNICO, to our followers, to Matricle 1 for letting us be here, to the amazing TEDxCopenhagen crew who's been working really hard behind the scenes. And we are excited to be back in a couple of weeks. So tune in for our 7th live session, which will take place on June 1st with the topic, the acceleration of the non-standard job. So thank you for joining in today, and see you soon again. Bye.